Filipino women all over the world have proven time and again that they are a force to be reckoned with. The first Filipino Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Ressa, was a woman. The country's first Olympic gold medalist, Heidelin Diaz, was a woman. In the film industry, Dolly De Leon became the first Filipino to be nominated for Best Supporting Actress in the Golden Globes. Filipinos in film roles are in a unique position to tell the stories the Filipino way, whether they are behind or in front of the camera. Hello, I'm Michelle Abad, and welcome to At Home sa Abroad, Rappler's one-stop show for everything related to the Filipino diaspora. Here we discuss topics important to Filipinos all over the world, from concerns and welfare of overseas Filipino workers to celebrating Pinoy success stories to reconnecting with cultural roots at iba pa. As we wrap up Women's Month, we feature a Filipina director who is making strides in the worldwide film industry. She is Michele Josue, an Emmy award-winning Filipino-American documentary filmmaker based in Los Angeles. Her feature debut, Shepard is a Friend of Mine, won 10 Best Documentary and Audience Awards from festivals worldwide. One of her latest works, Nurse Unseen, tells the story of the unsung Filipino nurses who risked their lives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Michele, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for working out the time difference to make this happen. Much appreciated, and it's really an honor to be here talking with you.
It's really our pleasure. So I think maybe just to start this, I think I wanted to know more about you personally as
Sure.
a family of Filipino immigrants. And later on, we'll talk more about your career in film. So I'd like to know more about your story as part of the Filipino diaspora. Were you born in the Philippines or in the US? And which generation of your family immigrated to the States? And what was life like growing up?
So I am the middle child. I have two other sisters, and I'm the middle. My mom and my dad came to the U.S. from Sagay in Negros in the late 1960s. They were recruited through their respective positions. My mom, they both worked at a small rural bank in Sagay City. And then my mom was recruited by the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. So that's how she came over to the States. And my dad, who wasn't married to my mom at the time, was deeply in love with her and followed her all the way to the U.S. But my mom wasn't the first one in our family to be here. My aunt, who also lived in our home with us and was essentially my second mom, she was already in the States. She came to the U.S. from the Philippines, I want to say in the late 1960s, like 1968, I believe, as an exchange visitor nurse. And eventually she got a permanent position as an oncology nurse in Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. So my mom already had some family in the United States. And it was really through nursing, through this type of labor recruitment, that I was able to have my life here in America.
Mhm. How did you develop like your passions growing up? Like, did your mom want you to go into the medical field, or like were you like free to choose what you wanted to do?
I That's a very interesting question, and one that I get all the time. So I think a lot of children of Filipino parents um, tend to go into the medical field. Their parents, urge them to go into nursing or to become a doctor. And although those aspirations were there was never any like hard and set rules. Like there was that freedom that we could explore and become who we really wanted to be. So I'm really grateful to have that upbringing. So, I think my younger sister was supposed to be the nurse in the family, but ultimately none of the three sisters went into the medical field. But just growing up, I was always really into the arts. I loved singing and dancing. And with my neighborhood friends, we would write plays and skits and put it on for our parents. So we were always playing and we were always telling stories, and that love of story and that love of play translated into me wanting to take it further into a professional career. So to backtrack, like when I went to middle school and high school, I tried out for every single school play. And then I just became so obsessed with the art of storytelling, every facet of it. And I started writing my own plays and casting my friends in my own plays and directing it. And I just loved having my hands in every little bit of storytelling, whether it was production design, costume, the words that were coming out of their mouths, like all of it was just really exciting. So then when it was time to graduate, I was really thinking hard about, what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I had a friend in high school who said that she was looking into applying to film school. And that was something I never even heard of. I didn't really know that that was possible, that you could study film, get a degree in film, and then go on to have like a professional career. So I started looking into that a lot more. And I applied to Emerson College in Boston. And I got in, and then I went there and got my degree in film. And I mean, the long story short, now I'm here in Los Angeles making a go of it myself as a professional filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, what was it like when you were just a film student, fresh out of school, and then you just started your career? Did I understand that correctly? You started your career in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess technically, yes. So there's a missing beat there, missing chapter of my life. My mom, I mentioned she worked in the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And one of the exciting benefits that they would offer their employees would be if you wanted to send your children abroad, they would pay for a large portion of the tuition. So my mom found out about this and decided that we were going to be sent abroad to go to school in the American school in Switzerland. So this was an international boarding school. So we went there, and that's where my love of art and theater really took hold. So when I went to film school in Boston, I didn't know how I was going to break into the industry. Like I had done some internships, but I had really I just didn't know how you go about doing that. But luckily, when I went back to visit my boarding school to see my younger sister graduate, that school hired me to make a short documentary film commemorating the history of the school. And that was the very first documentary I ever made. I didn't know how to do it. I just did it. But it was like such a tremendous experience, just getting my hands dirty and just really learning by doing. So that was my first job.
Okay. So like as you were breaking into the industry and like making bigger films that reached larger audiences, do you feel that maybe you were treated differently because you were a woman of color? Like, especially in a field where people already consider it difficult to succeed no matter what race you are.
That is, it's a really tough question. It's really tough to answer it because, I'm only in my skin. Like, I don't really know what it's like to be, a cisgender white, man, heterosexual man, working in the career in a similar career. So, being myself, like, I don't know. I guess I did feel, looking back, I would feel, and maybe it's just, I was projecting or something, but I did feel like underestimated at times. And to counterbalance that, I would feel like I had to work that much harder to prove myself. So I was always like really ambitious, just feeling like if I produced more, if I did really good work, that would somehow counterbalance this image of me being less than or other. So I don't know if I can contribute to that being actually true externally, or maybe it's just my internal psychology, but maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. I do know that, it's very easy to see when you look around that most people, most directors are white men. There's not many directors working that look like me, that are telling the type of stories that I want to tell. So I guess just by that fact alone, it is harder to be a woman of color, a Filipino, working in such a competitive industry.
Yeah, that's I can say that that's super correct. You know, like you have two factors, right? The fact that you're a woman and you're that a woman of color, so that makes it like extra difficult to try and navigate these types of things. So let's
Yeah.
go to the film that got you the 2016 Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Special Class Special. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, Matt Shepard is a friend of mine. So why did you decide to tell Matt's story, and what was it like to film the documentary?
So I spoke about attending that international boarding school in high school. One of the kids there was Matthew Shepard. We called him Matt. Matt was a few grades above me in school, but we grew close because we both had the same love of theater. And we would often be paired up together in auditions because we were both of smaller stature. And we really bonded. And I remember he had a camcorder that he brought from his home in Wyoming, and we would run around the school and make little home videos, with aspirations of making like a film about what it was like to be at this boarding school. So he graduated a few years before me. We lost touch. This was before social media. And then it was my second year at Emerson, second year at film school. And I remember my sister calling me, and she told me to turn on the news, turn on CNN. And sure enough, there was this news story about this young man, Matthew Shepard, who was 21, who was kidnapped, tortured, and left to die out on a remote prairie fence in Laramie, Wyoming. And he was targeted because he was gay. But this was my friend. It wasn't this crazy news story. This is just someone who I was very close to. So I was really grappling with just the overwhelming nature of it all. And as I witnessed his story unfold over the worldwide news cycle, what I saw taking place was Matt's humanity being stripped away. People didn't know about how good of a friend he was or how well traveled he was. He was just this icon, essentially, this martyr, this person who was murdered for being gay, and he was just stripped of all this nuance. And the world didn't know anything about him other than the egregious way in which he died. So the seed for telling his story, for telling Matt's story, was immediate. I knew then, as a friend of his, that I wanted to honor Matt's voice. I wanted to be able to share his story in the way it should be told. I just was waiting for the time that I was professionally ready to do his story justice. So it did take 10 years later for me to feel ready enough for me to feel the courage to take this project on. And I'm glad I really did that, but it was very, very difficult. But it's probably going to be the film that I'm most proud of.
Mhm. What was it like to film that? That's um, it's really an amazing thing that you got the courage to do that, because if that happened to me, if I had a friend that was killed that way, it really would take a long time for me to process that, and let alone like revisit all of that and create a whole entire documentary about that. So like let me like fill me in on the whole process from like, after 10 years, okay, I feel like I'm ready to take this on professionally. When you were revisiting it, what was it like to, talk to people who were important to him, and like try to make his story more significant and not just make him a statistic? What was that like?
It was as difficult as you can imagine it being. I mean, I hadn't really come to terms with Matt's death for those 10 years. I remember going to his funeral, being with all, his friends and family, and then going back to our respective places all around the world and just trying our hardest to just to go about our lives. But with this heavy, like gaping wound, so it really took this film to be able to even articulate and express what that loss meant to me, meant to all of us who were close to him. So I'm really grateful that I took it on. But it was very difficult. The easiest part of the project, I will say, was getting the blessing of his parents to make the film. I mean, they're amazing people. They're really, I hold them in the highest regard. When I approached them about making the film, his mom just said, it's about time. And I think I just started crying, and I cry very often. My feelings, my emotions are very like up on the surface, but it was because her blessing, that I felt like I could do this, that she would somehow give me the strength to do this, because she gave me the go ahead. And then I went and talked to all his close friends, all the people that I felt would provide that necessary perspective on who he actually was as a person. And it was not without hardships. This is stuff that is very difficult to talk about. A lot of us were, just crying, really reliving all these memories. And it was very, very hard, but I think in a way it was very cathartic. And ultimately, on a grander scale, we were really glad that we could contribute to his legacy in this meaningful way, allow people to really know who Matt was as a person, because he was robbed of his voice. And the film tries to give that back, in the way that it can.
So it must have been, I can tell by the way you're telling your story how difficult and personally, emotionally charged the making of this film was. But these stories have to be told, as what I'm getting from there. So
Yeah.
how did you feel when it won all of these awards? Like, if you just look at if you look at the poster and like all of the promotional materials, there's like so many of them, you can't actually read them unless you like look at them one by one. So like, how did you feel when it won all of these awards and the Emmy?
That's really kind of you and sweet of you to say. That is just a snapshot, all those accolades, but what it really meant, making that film was so indie. I didn't have, it was me and my ex at the time, and a very small team. We really just did it such an independent way. We crowdsourced most of the funding. Again, we didn't have any backing, so we were just trying to get it done any way we could think of. And so it was, a lot of times we wanted to give up. A lot of times, we don't have the funding, or we don't have the experience. Like, what do we do? But we just somehow just kept moving forward little by little. And then when we started submitting the film to film festivals, it really wasn't getting in anywhere. I think people thought this was an old story. It's too sad of a story. Nobody wants to relive this anymore. So we were just coming to terms with so much rejection. And then finally, we got into Mill Valley Film Festival, and then IDFA, which is like the best documentary film festival in the world. And then Cleveland, and that just changed the trajectory of the film. And then it slowly started to gain momentum, and then people were really starting to accept the story as we wanted to share it. And then when I would share it with these audiences, I would see I would actually feel like the energy in the room, and I could feel people just weeping for Matt, weeping for their own families, weeping for people in their lives that reminded themselves of Matt. So it was such a beautiful thing, but it was very, very difficult. So I took that film on tour for about 2 years. This is just the opposite trajectory of most films. Most films, of this stature, like go premiere at like Sundance or South by or Berlin, and then they get acquired and they have like a whole big distribution picture, and it's really dramatic and beautiful. But ours is just the opposite. We weren't getting in anywhere. We finally started getting into places, finally slowly started accumulating awards, finally got some sort of distribution, and then we got Logo to pick up the film for its broadcast rights. And then we won the Emmy 2 years after our film festival premiere, and 6 years after we started filming. So by the time we got that award, I was tired, but I was validated. I felt validated that, we never compromised. We stayed true to our vision. We did it through community. So many people believed in us and carried us every step of the way. So that award was because of all those blood, sweat, and tears. It was a validation of Matt's family and all the work that they do, you know, following Matt's death, trying to still change the world, and it's honoring Matt's legacy. So it means so much more than, you know, just that one award. It just means like so many years of hardship and grief. You know, now like people could see that this was a worthwhile endeavor that hopefully will live on, you know, after I'm gone. Hopefully this film and Matt's story will survive me, and people will still be learning and being inspired by it.
Mhm. Wonderful. Let's go to your Netflix docu-series, Happy Jail. So you unearth the unspoken stories of the dancing inmates in a jail based in Cebu. So their performance of Thriller in
Yes.
2007 or 2008 gained, a lot of by their performance of Thriller by Michael Jackson went viral even before viral was a thing. So
Yes.
I was wondering, like, was it your first time to film a documentary based in the Philippines? And what were some insights that you gained on the Philippine justice system and maybe in general from producing that documentary?
Yeah. So while I was making Matt Shepard as a friend of mine, I was shown this, you know, YouTube video. Everyone saw it. It was viral, as you say. I think the only other viral video at that time was like a cat playing piano or something, and then it was the dancing inmates. And I saw that clip, and I was awestruck. I was proud to be Filipino because it's only in a Philippine jail that something like that could happen. So I knew deep down that that would be my next project. So when Matt Shepard, as a friend of mine, was more sustainable, um, that's where I, you know, moved my focus. So we went to the Philippines just on spec. I Facebook messaged the consultant of the jail, Marco Terral, and just said on a whim, like, "Hey, I'm coming to the Philippines. I'd love to visit the dancing inmates. I'm thinking about doing this film project. Would that be possible?" And he was very amenable, very friendly. Said, "Come on down." So I went. I witnessed them dancing, and I got goosebumps because it was such a tremendous sight to see. Almost 1,000, you know, inmates dancing in harmony, um, seemingly very joyous and doing so well. And I got goosebumps, and I thought this was amazing. This definitely should be a feature film. And yes, it was my first time filming in the Philippines. My very first experience with a jail, like, let alone, you know, like, I have no experience with the jail system in the United States, nor had I any experience with the jail system in the Philippines. So the whole thing was a learning experience for me. But, you know, I will say that the title of the project, of this series, Happy Jail, really came from the inmates themselves. This was the term, this was what they called CPDRC. They called it Happy Jail. So that's why it's called that. So while there was some happy moments, you know, a lot of the dancing, a lot of the camaraderie, really there was a lot of tragic things that we witnessed. You know, a lot of people got sick and died in there. So what I saw when I was there was just a really overburdened, overcrowded jail. And I think most of the jails around the Philippines are like that, if CPDRC is representative of, you know, the nationwide picture. And it just is an untenable situation. So while we were there and we started filming, this was in 2016, right when Duterte took office, and I guess near the beginning of, you know, the Duterte's drug war. So while we were filming, we were witnessing in real time this massive influx of people coming in, charged with drug offenses, both minor and major. And it was clear that the jail just logistically, physically, like, couldn't handle it all. So it was a very interesting moment in time that we were able to capture just the implosion of this jail at that time, due to all these external political pressures, due to, again, this untenable justice system. But what I really wanted to focus on was, you know, the humanity of it all. I wanted to ask, you know, what was it like to really live in that experience what were those inmates, feeling? How were they holding on to hope? How were they how are they gaining the sense of community and connection through dance? Those are the types of questions we were really asking while bearing witness to, the justice system as a whole. And I will say, in making that project, I did learn that, the United States and the Philippines are the only two nations in the world that operate on a cash bail system. So that was eye-opening to me, because, you think innocent until proven guilty, but then when you're there in the jail with the inmates, a lot of these inmates are poor. A lot of these inmates were accused of very minor drug crimes. And they're just waiting for their day in court. They don't have the means to pay the money it would take to bail them out. So they're just languishing there, sometimes for years. And it's just really tragic to see. And again, if you're of means or if you're wealthy, it's a whole different story for you. So that was something that was really, really hard to see and to witness.
Yeah, some might even say that like the conditions of CPDRC are like even relatively better than other jails in the Philippines. Like, you notice there in the docu-series that like at least some of them have their own bunks, or if they don't have
Yes.
bunks, they have hammocks. But like in other jails, like they have to like sleep on top of each other. There are viral pictures of what that looks like. And I think what's also truly shocking was that, how it also tackled that many, or I'm not sure about many, most or all of the inmates inside that jail were not actually convicted, and the ones who were actually convicted would have to move to the main security, maximum security jail in Muntinlupa in Metro Manila. So it really is an amazing exhibition of what that was, and during that time, especially during the height of Duterte's drug war, where there were extrajudicial killings, but at the same time, the ones who went to jail, what was their situation. So that was what that uncovered as well. So apart from that, I wanted to go also to one of your more recent films. So it's been 3 years since the COVID-19 pandemic put the world on lockdown, and your documentary Nurse Unseen tells the stories of Filipino nurses. And they say that you'll see a Filipino nurse in almost any hospital in the States, but the title of your documentary is Nurse Unseen. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So again, as I stated at the top of our interview, when you were asking me about my family, I come from a long line of nurses. My great grandmother was a nurse, my grandmother, my aunt, and in particular Tita Dodo, who is my second mom, essentially, who basically helped raise us. She was such a big influence on my life. So I wanted to make this film in honor of her, and especially going through the pandemic, in honor of all the Filipino-American nurses, who many of whom were coming out of retirement, to help on the front lines of COVID. And no one was really talking about that. That's what I mean when I say nurse unseen. I'm trying to identify this problem that maybe here in the United States, I don't know about in the Philippines, that there's so many Filipino nurses, and so many of them in critical care positions on the front lines of the pandemic, and their contributions and their sacrifices were not being celebrated or talked about or centered. And that's what my film wants to do, what my film strives to do, and we have that in the title. We want to, it's just not, we can't take them for granted anymore. They have to be seen and celebrated, because they've just contributed so much, especially as we went through the pandemic, and we were hearing reports about how, and this one particular report about how Filipino-American nurses make up only 4% of the registered nursing workforce in the United States, but at the height of COVID, they made up over 31.5% of the COVID nurse deaths. So that disproportionate statistic was really the catalyst for us to make this film and kicked us into high gear. That's why we wanted to tell the story of the Filipino-American nurse and have her seen and centered, because and I say this all the time, if we don't tell our stories, who will?
Hmm. Yeah, I wanted to ask like a an overarching question about like all of the films that you've made, or at least the ones that we talked about today. So you know, Matt Shepard, and a member of the LGBTQ community, um, inmates in jails, and nurses who are unseen, even though we see them everywhere, but somehow their voices are unheard. What do you think is the significance of, you know, telling these stories? Like, why did you decide to focus on these subjects, and you know, why do you think people should pay attention to these stories?
They say that you know, when you're looking back at a filmmaker's career, that they're just retelling the same story or the same theme over and over and over. And when you lay it out like that, I see what you're getting at. I do have this tendency to be um, really passionate and inspired by telling stories that don't get the spotlight that I feel that they deserve. And maybe that has to do with my upbringing and feeling underestimated or not noticed. That I want to help amplify people like that, stories like that, that don't necessarily get the shine that they should. Or conversely, like Matt Shepard, having their narrative twisted and told in a way that isn't genuine. So, you know, the way I told Matt's story really inspired me as a filmmaker moving forward. What I wanted to devote my career to. I wanted to, and I continue to do this, to devote my career to telling stories that other people don't really champion. You know, for me, the stories that matter are stories about, you know, being Filipino-American and what that looks like and what that feels like. And if, again, if no one else is telling those stories in that way, like I want to be the one to do it because, you know, our stories matter. Our stories deserve to be seen. So with the inmates, with Matt, with Filipino-Americans, with our nurses specifically. These are stories that mainstream audiences in the United States and across the world should know about. You know, we are contributing so much to industries all over the world, the healthcare system, the arts, like you were saying at the opening. I mean, we are making inroads and accomplishing great things. So we should be celebrated on the worldwide stage in a more mainstream way. So through my work, you know, through my films, I just hope to help that effort every little bit I can.
Last note, maybe on a last note, what advice would you give to aspiring Filipina filmmakers, and as well as to other Filipino women who want to excel in their own fields, regardless of what that is, you know, abroad?
Um, well, we talked a little bit about how competitive this industry is and being a filmmaker. You know, once you're a professional filmmaker, um, it can be hard, and you have to be really comfortable with rejection and being told no. And so I guess my advice would be to aspiring filmmakers or filmmakers just starting out is to be okay with that and not let that dictate your career path. Don't let a no stop you. Like, you don't need permission to make your story or to be the filmmaker you want to be. I've never asked permission to do the films that I've wanted to make. Um, you know, I just tried to make it happen and with all the means and resources that I could put together at that time. So get comfortable with the rejection because you're going to face it a lot, and just move through it and move past it. Um, and then otherwise, like, I think what really helps with filmmaking is finding community and finding your tribe, if you will, just like your like-minded friends and collaborators who really inspire you to be better, to work harder, to do good work, and just really find those people, stick with them, and nurture those relationships. You know, this business is really relationship based, and you tend to work with people that, you know, you worked with in the past that you want to keep working with. So just know that, and just invest in relationships, put yourself out there, build community, you know, whether it's online or on set. just do whatever you can to find those people. And once you do, hold on to them, nurture them, be good to them, because you'll all help each other as you move forward through this life.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle, for telling us your inspiring stories.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
All right. Again, you're tuned into At Home sa Abroad on Rappler. I'm Michelle Abad. Thank you for listening.